Hello everyone, welcome to my YouTube channel. In this video, we are going to see the extension contents for the AWS Certified Cloud Practitioner exam. In the same YouTube channel, I had already posted the set of videos in the form of the AWS Certified Cloud Practitioner crash course where I try to debrief the contents, the what are all the contents which are required for the person to pass the exam are already available there. Those videos are posted 2 years before, so I got lot of comments asking for the validity of the exam contents. The contents which are already there in the videos are completely valid. In order to add more extensions to it, I am just posting this new video. In this video I will be covering the new topics, what are all the new areas which AWS introduced over the period of 2 years. Those topics I am going to cover as the part of this video. So to make it very clear, if you are preparing for the cloud practitioner exam using the crash course which is available in my YouTube channel, you ensure you watch all the 13 videos and then you can watch this video as the continuation video. Without further ado, I am just going to take you through the contents. First, as the part of the analytics services, you need to know the AWS Data Exchange. The AWS Data Exchange is slightly a newer service which is introduced by the AWS, which holds majority of the data products. It holds almost around 3,500 products and 300 providers, and everything is available there. To make it simple, data exchange is more or less similar to AWS Marketplace. This is dedicated for data products alone. To make it more clearer, please see this diagram below. It's like, say I am a data provider. What I can do, I can just upload my contents into the S3 bucket and I will register my data product into the AWS Data Exchange for S3. Obviously, what it does, it will share the data, it will take care of all these things. Say if a subscriber comes in, the subscriber can go and see the list of data products from the AWS Data Exchange, and then he will subscribe for it. So the provider can give the access to the data. Obviously, the subscriber can access the data via various mechanisms like Athena or SageMaker Future Store or EMR or S3. So as simple as it is, if you want to share the data in a marketplace based manner, then AWS Data Exchange is the ideal service for you. The next two things I just wanted to focus upon are EMR serverless and Redshift serverless. So predominantly on our course, which we discussed earlier, we didn't discuss about EMR serverless and Redshift serverless. Over the period of past 2 years, these services got introduced. So if some questions related to the EMR serverless came in the exam, you might be in a confused state that whether it is there or not and all. For that reason, I am just going to talk about EMR serverless. So EMR serverless is as simple as it is providing the EMR in the serverless fashion. Now comes a question: what is the difference between EMR serverless and AWS Glue? AWS Glue is already a serverless service. What is the rationale behind creation of EMR serverless? To make it more simple, Glue is very unique. Very unique in the sense, Glue is dedicated for PySpark applications alone. If you are going to write your code in PySpark, then Glue dynamic frames will be very helpful. But if you want to implement the complete big data ecosystem, say like Apache Fig, Apache Hive, all those things, right, then EMR serverless can be the right service for you. So, in order to differentiate in the exam, if you are asked about a serverless service and then they talk about a big data environment apart from PySpark, then EMR serverless can be the right option. Please give some time for this specific picture to understand it more. Coming to the next part of Redshift serverless. So similarly, same option. Previously, we used to have Redshift in the form of the clusters. So we need to provide the compute, we need to provide the storage and everything. But with the help of the Redshift serverless, everything is abstracted in the form of the RPUs, which is the Redshift processing units. So as simple as is, on a click of a button, we can create the Redshift serverless serverless over the dataset which is already lying on the S3 or something, and we can create the Redshift clusters in the serverless mode, right? So in the exam, if you are asked about data warehouse in a serverless fashion, Redshift serverless can be the wisest choice there. Some other advancements typically in the autocopy. Say usually we used to run the copy commands to copy the data from Amazon S3 to AWS Redshift. But in this case, there is no necessity to run the copy command. There is a new option called autocopy, which will simplify the data loading from S3 to Redshift. And the new introduction of streaming ingestion from the various different sources like Kinesis data streams and manager streaming for Apache Kafka. Now we can directly ingest the data from the streaming ingestion options into Redshift. Previously, we need to make use of Kinesis data firehose to ingest the data to the Redshift. Now there is no necessity for it. We can directly ingest it into Redshift. Moving on to the next section, this is very important. We didn't discuss about the Amazon Event Bridge in the previous videos. So Amazon Event Bridge is kind of an simplistic way to represent it is it is the extension or it is the abstraction from CloudWatch events. Previously, we used to have something called CloudWatch events, which can be used to schedule something, which can be used to monitor something, filter something on the CloudWatch logs. All these things are possible using CloudWatch events. Now, what they did, they created a specific service called Event Bridge, which is the complete abstraction of CloudWatch events. So, it will help in creating the loosely coupled event-driven architectures. It is also very helpful in point-to-point integrations between the producers and consumers. So as simple as it is, please refer to this diagram. There is the availability of Event Bridge pipes which will help you to filter the incoming logs. Say like whatever the data which is coming in from varieties of data sources, it will do the filtration and then from there it can be consumed by the consume layer. As simple as it is, and then it is possible to schedule the specific set of jobs and everything using Amazon Event Bridge. Moving on to the business applications, there is a mention of Amazon Connect in the exam guide for cloud practitioner exam. So for that reason, I'm just adding about Amazon Connect. Amazon Connect is the omni-channel cloud contact center. So as simple as is, whenever you face any questions related to contact center in your exam, then Amazon Connect can be an easiest choice for it. So please refer to this diagram here. It's like say a customer, it is an intelligent voice and then chat and SMS driven contact center application which will very drastically help the agents to attend the calls in the contact center. As simple as it is, agent productivity and everything got heavily improved because of Amazon Connect. Moving on to the next stuff, there is an additional stuff. Again, it is mentioned in the Cloud Practitioner exam guide, AWS Billing Conductor. On addition to the typical FinOps cost management services like AWS Cost Explorer, AWS Cost Usage Reports, AWS Budgets, there is something called AWS Billing Conductor. To understand it in a simplest way, it provides the option of creating billing groups where we can group the accounts together in the form of the billing groups, and for that specific group we can identify and analyze the cost and usage report and the rate management and everything. So we can club the AWS accounts in the form of the billing group, and on top of the billing group we can see the consolidated billing, consolidated cost usage and consolidated margin analysis, etc. So that is the advantage of using the AWS Billing Conductor. Moving on to the next section, I just it's like we didn't discuss about AWS batch in the compute section of the course. So AWS batch is as simple as it is. Batch is always a batch, right? So whenever I process a data in a real time, then I will call it as a real time. Say I want to process my data once a week, once a day, then these things are called as a batch process. So ideally AWS batch is one such operation. So in the exam, if you got a question stating I want to do something once a day or once in 2 days or once in a week, then ideally AWS batch is the best option for that question. And another important factor, AWS batch needs some criteria to be satisfied. One of the criteria is we need to containerize the applications. Whenever we are deploying anything on AWS batch, it needs to be done via ECS or EKS or Fargate type of the instances. Then only you can containerize the application and put it into the batch. As simple as it is. Batch is having an extensive support with variety of workflow engines, say like Apache Airflow or like step functions or Lugi or Metaflow or Nextflow, etc. As simple as it is. Coming on to the other important factors, it is like AWS local zones. There is a mention again about the AWS local zones in the exam guide for cloud practitioner. AWS local zone is a very easy way to create and deploy your infrastructure in the region very closer to you, not a region specifically, in the place which is very closer to you. As we already know, AWS offers two things. Regions, within the regions we are having something called as an availability zone, which is geographically separated between each other. But whereas in this case, if you want to deploy your infrastructure which is very closer to you, AWS offers something called as the AWS local zones. Please Google it, you will find what are all the locations on which AWS local zones are available. So it's as simple as it is. You can enable the AWS local zones in the AWS management console, and we can extend your VPC to that new local zones, so that you can get the infrastructure which is very nearer to you. And the other form is the AWS outpost. AWS outpost is predominantly, it is all about taking the AWS infrastructure to your on-premises ecosystem. Say it is like, instead of using all this cloud and other thing, I want the AWS infrastructure to be deployed on my on-premises. Then AWS Outpost is the simplest option. You need to get in touch with the AWS and ask for Outpost. AWS will ship the Outpost rack for you. So it is like there are two options available: Outpost rack and Outpost servers. Servers are slightly upgraded version of racks. You will get the dedicated services, dedicated API and everything in your on-premises using AWS Outpost. So it is an external device. It is the server rack that AWS can come and install on our on-premises ecosystem. That specific rack is connected to the AWS cloud via the direct connector or other options. In that way, it is very useful for managing AWS within the on-premises ecosystem. Moving on, AWS Wavelength. Again, AWS Wavelength is slightly newer service. This is mainly for dedicated mobile networks and 5G connections. Say if you want to use the mobile networks for 5G connections, which will go into the AWS ecosystem in a low latency speed, then AWS Wavelength is the ideal service to use. Say if you are having a mobile edge device and you need to make use of 5G and use the low latency speed, ultra low latency speeds of AWS, then Wavelength is the ideal option. AWS Activate for startups. This is something, if you are a startup company and you want to make use of AWS, then AWS is offering more capabilities for startups in the form of AWS credits and also in the form of the guidance and the developer support credits, etc. So if you are a startup company and want to utilize the AWS, want to enjoy some benefits out of AWS, then AWS Activate is the ideal thing. And AWS IQ is the typical way to connect with AWS certified experts. So if you see the diagram here, on the console we can give a request, then the request will be reviewed. Once it is reviewed, AWS will nominate or it will provide a selected expert for your given request, and then that expert will work along with us and we need to pay for the expert's work in a simplistic way. So as simple as it is like gaining a talent. It is like getting a talent from the talent pool, as simple as it is. Right. And moving on to the databases part, there is a mention about MemoryDB for Redis. This is a clear call out in the Cloud Practitioner exam guide. We didn't cover this specific topic on the databases section. So AWS introduced a new database itself for Redis. Previously, we used to have Elastic Cache version which supports Memcached and Redis. Now, MemoryDB for Redis itself is a new database. It comes up with all the compatibilities on the open source Redis framework. It provides its ideal use case for the microservices architecture. It provides a ultra low latency, fast performance. It provides JSON support. It provides vector search support for generative AI based applications as well. And then moving on to the developer tools, app config. App config is as simple as it is application configuration. This is very helpful for you to make changes in your application, make configuration changes in your applications which are running in production. Typically, if you want to make changes to the production environment, it will require a downtime for your application. But in this case, you can apply your changes in a very realistic and a measurable way. So you can measure your impact before deploying the changes onto the production environment. So all those specific things are achievable using AWS app config with the help of the future flags and operational flags. Moving on, these are all an interesting, but it's like quite an older topics which I forgot to cover as the part of the crash course. Command line interface is as simple as is. It's an CLI for AWS, so you can interact with AWS in an command line mode using the typical commands. For example, say like AWS S3 LS will list me all the set of S3 buckets on my AWS account. So all the things, whatever which you are doing the AWS management console, are possible by firing the command line interface commands against the AWS, right? So that is called as the AWS CLI. And AWS Cloud9 is the typical browser based IDE which is provided by AWS. So if you are looking for an alternative for VS Code, say like PyCharm, kind of an integrated development environments, Cloud9 is the ideal replacement for it. So if you want to develop your code and everything based on your browser, we can very well utilize the Cloud9. And then there is an stuff called Cloud Artifact. Cloud Artifact is as simple as it is. It provides you the opportunity to store all your artifacts, say like Maven, Gradle, whatever, right? All your code artifacts can be stored in the centralized repository called AWS Code Artifact. And then AWS X-Ray. AWS X-Ray is all about traces. Please don't confuse CloudTrail and CloudWatch with X-Ray. X-Ray is a completely different service. It helps you to trace your application. It helps you to trace your request and everything, right? This diagram will explain it in a more clear way. We need to run X-ray daemon on whatever typical application code. X-ray daemon using the AWS X-ray SDK. And then what it does, it captures all the traces and it is pushed against the X-ray API. In the management console, we can utilize this web server, web-based, it's like web-based browser for X-ray console where you can see the traces. It's clearly represented here, right? This is the typical trace. A user comes in from there, he goes to this, and then he comes back, he goes to this. All these typical traces are provided to us in the form of the rich UI on web browser. That's how the X-ray will be helpful. In predominant cases, if you want to trace a numerous number of Lambda functions which is called as a part of your application, then X-ray can be an ideal choice for those set of use cases. Moving on to AWS IoT. These two features, right? IoT Core and IoT Greengrass. It helps you to interact, it helps you to integrate your IoT based applications with the AWS ecosystem. So as simple as it is, if you can see here, it's a smart car which is installed with all the IoT sensors and everything. So obviously these IoT sensor related data needs to be pushed into the AWS ecosystem. IoT Core is the ideal way by which you can utilize the MQTT protocol. So the sensors will emit the MQTT data in the form of MQTT, and then then it is consumed by the IoT core. Subsequently, either using a Lambda or using the Kinesis, we can stream the data and we can process the data within the AWS ecosystem. So this is the ideal starting point for any of the IoT related use cases. And IoT greengrass is the edge device. So if you can see in the diagram, if I want to run any of the IoT on the edge, say like within that device itself, on the IoT device itself, then IoT greengrass will provide that opportunity. Using the IoT greengrass client software, we can integrate that with the IoT device, and then from there we can push the data into the AWS cloud. So IoT greengrass is all about edge computing, running the IoT on the edge. Moving on the typical management and governance section, there is something called AWS Compute Optimizer. It's very simple. It's a kind of an FinOps based service. It provides a recommendation about over provisioning and under provisioning of typical compute use cases like EC2, EBS, ECS, and Fargate. So you can open up the Compute Optimizer on Management Console, where it will say if you under provisioned your EC2 or if you over provisioned your EC2, and it will provide the recommendations as well for it. So it's a very useful service to use to understand the cost actually. Moving on, AWS License Manager. This is very helpful to manage your software licenses. As simple as it is, if you are creating a new software and you want to manage the license for that software, it will be provided by AWS License Manager. Moving on, in the same management and governance category, there is something called as a service catalog. This service is ideally useful for the administrators. Say I am an IT admin. I want to customize the user experience for the set of users who are going to provision infrastructure on the AWS environment. For example, I don't want the EC2 to represent in the same way what AWS is going to provide. I will abstract most of the EC2 things, say from the security group, say from all the other networking parameters, right? I can do all these things using the CloudFormation templates or using the Terraform configurations on service catalog. So admin can baseline the typical infrastructure using the service catalog. So the developers or the other cloud consumers can come in and take that specific products out of the service catalog and they can provision it. As simple as it is. It will abstract the majority of work and it is very helpful for the administrators on cloud. Moving on to the security and compliance, we forgot to discuss about Amazon Cognito. Cognito is typically an CIAM service, simplistic customer identity and access management service, which provides the federation opportunities. Say using my Google ID, using my Meta ID or Facebook ID, instead of providing all the details, name and all so details to log in to register my user with any of the applications, instead we can federate that using the native tokens. It's like typically, as I mentioned about Google or Facebook, those things are possible using Amazon Cognito. Cognito provides identity pools and user pools, but those things are out of scope for the exam. But please refer to the diagram. This diagram will provide more information about how the federation will happen. Federation of user identities will happen. Moving on, Amazon Detective. The name itself is very evident. It's again a detective. What detective does? Detective find the problematic areas. Detective can find what are all the issues which are currently running over my existing account. All these things. It works based on the machine learning. Typically, it will run statistical analysis, graph theory, and all the things against the AWS account and generate the visualizations that you conduct to more efficiently secure your investigations. So it's like detective is having a pre-built data aggregation, summaries and everything, so that you can find the defects in a very quicker manner. Moving on the same stuff, there is something called AWS RAM. AWS RAM is very helpful to, again, it's similar to service catalog, not in a correct same actual ways, in a completely different way. It is like service catalog, whatever we discussed, it is all about provisioning of infra. This is all about how you are going to allow the users to make use of the resources within the AWS ecosystem using the IAM role, right? So you can securely share your resources across AWS accounts within your organization, right? Within the AWS organizations using the IAM roles and various other features, right? So please go through this diagram. You can specify the resource share details, and then you can associate the permissions for it, and then you can grant that specific permissions to the principals. Who are all the principals for the OU units? It is like organization units, IAM roles and users, so that it is easy for users to consume the specific resource or service from the AWS, as simple as it is. So with this we conclude the end of this specific video, where I am just trying to cover the pending resources which are introduced over the period of past 2.5 years. So this video must have to be viewed in order to successfully pass the exam. So you can watch through all the 13 videos, and then you can watch this video as well. I will post another video on the new set of practice questions as well. So all these video links will be added in the description for each and every video, so you cannot miss it. I will add this into the playlist as well. Hope this video has been informative for you. Please do subscribe for me if you want to watch similar videos. Thank you for watching.